Perfect. All right. Welcome everybody to Nine Vibes. We're going to be talking about the Sator Square. A lot of people have been asking me about it. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to take a moment and kind of emphasize and talk about that with you guys. All right. So everybody should be able to see my page at this point. And we're going to go ahead and jump in. So the Sator Square or ROTAS square, it's a two-dimensional word square containing a 5-word Latin palindrome. Okay, so I love palindromes. You might have seen them on Nine Vibes. So basically, it features an early Christian as well as magical context. Okay, so the earliest examples of the Sator Square date back to the ruins of Pompeii. And is attributed to some scholars to be Jewish or mythic origins. All right, so it is very, very mysterious. It was actually discovered in the ashes of basically a town that was covered in ashes after a volcano. And so there's a lot of information that goes into the square, and that's what we're going to talk about. All right. So remember, we've got to talk about where letters and numbers directly correlate to each other. So I explained to you guys that whether you're talking about the Hebrew alphabet or whether you're talking about the Greek alphabet, these are the oldest. Now we can go into Mesopotamia, we can go even further than that, but it starts to get very choppy. There's no clear, concise understanding of their alphabet, but there is a clear and concise understanding about the Hebrew alphabet as well as the Latin and the Greek alphabet. And so the understanding of this is that it does not matter which one you're using because the digital root is still going to be 1 through 9. All right, so as you can see here, whether you're talking about the Hebrew, all right, so Alf, you end up with 1, and Bet, you end up with 2, and so on and so forth. If you end up looking at the Latin, you've got A, 1, B, 2, C, 3. And then if you end up looking at the Hebrew correlated to that, you have 22, 21, 20. So if you reduce all of these numbers down to actual digit roots, you end up with 1 through 9, right? 22 is just 2 plus 2, which is 4. 20 is just 2 plus 0, which is 2. So it never expands past that 1 through 9, which is why you can use these letters and these words to correlate understandings about herbs, about healing, about earth, because it's going to be directly connected to that 9 because 9 is as above, so below. All right, so let's jump to the Sator Square and see how we can apply that knowledge. So what we have here is we have the Sator Square. All right, we have Seder, we have AREPO, we have TENET, we have opera, and we have ROTAS. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that these are just mirrors of each other because the S here is the S here, the A here is the A here. So ROTAS is just Seder backwards. Opera is just AREPO backwards. And TENET, which is the most amazing part about this, is TENET forwards and backwards. Okay, same exact thing right here. You've got Seder going down, you've got ROTAS going down, but TENET is going to be the only one that actually moves in either direction untouched. Now, this is a very important thing. All right, so let's go ahead and let's look at the numbers we're going to apply to this. So we're going to apply the Greek because the Greek is the one that is going to reveal this. I have done it with the Hebrew, and you also have a fascinating center point, but there's more knowledge in the Greek that I've been able to find. Okay, so what we're doing is we're just taking these letters and we're applying the numbers for each letter. So S would be 200. As you can see, it would be 200 in this corner as well. R is going to be 100. It would be 100 in this corner as well. 300 is going to be T, and then you have E, which is going to be 5, and you have N, which is going to be 50. And so you end up seeing that in here as well. Okay, so after you see that, the next thing that we're going to talk about is going to be what it looks like when you remove the numbers and just look at the letters that we're talking about. So let's go ahead and look at that. Let me go ahead and get a pointer so you guys can actually see what I'm talking about here. So we're just go ahead and grab like a little spotlight. All right. So as you can see here, you've got the Seder that goes across, but you also have the TENET. All right, and it ends up going across like this. So I ended up shifting them so you can see it clear as day because this word is a very, very powerful word. TENET actually means, oops, let me go ahead and delete that real quick. So TENET actually means a principle or a belief, especially one of the main principles of a religion or philosophy. Okay, so this is very important to understand that when you're finding something like this in the ground, in ashes, if you really want to directly correlate to it, go to World War II, because this is something that Hitler was actually looking for. But you end up finding this thing that not only aligns with our numbers, that not only ends up giving you some powerful words, but it has this center word that we have defined before ever even going through this as a principle or belief, especially one of the main principles of religion or philosophy. Okay, so it's much older than that. Okay, so if we go ahead and we just isolate another area, you're going to see the NEN. You're going to see the NEN going up, and you're going to see it going across. And the reason I decided to go with the NEN is because of the fact that these are the ones that are going to have fives in them. Each one of these is represented by a 5, because N is 50. And if you reduce that down, 5 plus 0 is going to be 5. So what you end up with is you end up with this, a 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5 mini cross. Okay, now you also have a larger cross, because on top of those 5s, each one of them is also going to have a 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Okay, so let's go back to some of the information about the cross, such as Jesus had 5 wounds. This is very important in mentioning the crucifixion. Okay, Jesus was crucified on the 3rd hour. There were 3 crosses that were up there, and he was in the tomb for 3 days. So these numbers are not just arbitrary numbers. If there had happened to be a 7 here or a 1 here, I would throw this whole entire thing out because of the fact that it doesn't align. But the fact that you have the 5s and the 3s on top, directly linking to the words and the numbers used in the Bible, is pretty significant. Okay, so on top of that, you also end up having what I like to call the cube effect. So basically, you can choose any one of these 3, and once you build your cube, so if you fold this 5 in, and this 5 in, and this 5 in, and this 5 in, you still need a top. And so you can choose from any one of these 3s to create the actual top. So a lot of really cool information with that. But let's go ahead and let's look at a little bit more information, such as the power of the rotation. Okay, so this is known to rotate. And so when you are looking at, for instance, clockwise from 12 o'clock, right? So if we were to take 12 o'clock all the way to 9 o'clock, what you end up with is you end up with what I call Pac-Man. You end up with 270 on this side and 90 that is missing. Okay, now you can directly correlate that to the message of the church is going to be built on the cornerstone, or you could just look at it as a playful side of Pac-Man, the understanding that when one corner is missing out of a 360 circle, you're left with 270 on one side and 90 that are missing. Okay, so that's one way you can look at that as well. Another way that we can look at that is the understanding of the power of 5 and the power of 3s. Okay, so for instance, we'll just go with the power of 5 here. 432 times 5 is going to be 2,160. The moon is 2,160 miles in diameter. 432 times 2 is going to be 864. Okay, so even if you take it as we're talking about the 5s and then you have the 3s, so those are 2 different numbers. Or if you're looking at Solomon's knowledge, which is the understanding of the 5 and the 2, which is the solar and the moon, or which is what Solomon stands for. Sol is going to be the sun and Mon is going to be the moon. Or you can directly correlate this to the understanding of just the 2 fish and the 5 loaves of bread that are mentioned in the Bible. So 432 times 5 is going to give you the moon. 432 times 2 is going to give you the sun. So just really kind of cool, spin off there. There are 86,400 seconds or heartbeats in a day for a human if they are naturally, if they're in the flow. Okay, if you're sick, it's going to change. If you're hyper, it's going to change. So if you are in a state of just peace and flow, you will have 86,400 seconds or heartbeats in a day. The sun is 864,000 miles in diameter. Okay, so there's that 8, 6, 4 directly correlated. All right, 432 times 432 is 186,624, which is the speed of light. Okay, so it's all directly correlated and connected to each other. All right, but it goes much deeper than even that. All right. It goes much deeper than even that. All right. And the reason that I'm going to mention this is because what I'm about to show you can be offensive to some people. So what I want to do is I want to leave with a disclaimer that says the next slide is not meant to offend, upset, or hurt anyone. There's truth in all, but not all is truth. And this is just going to show you one side of that. All right. So what we are going to notice is we are going to notice that there are a very specific set of numbers inside of this Sator square. So if I were to draw one leg right here and going down, just makes like a little bit of a Z. Okay. Now, if I were to add up those numbers, I end up with 2 plus 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 3 plus 1 plus 2, which again is a palindrome. But what you'll notice is it adds up to 27. Okay. Now, the speed of light that you saw right there, if I were to add that up, also equals to 27. Okay. If I were to add vortex math, the 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 8 plus 7 plus 5 is also going to give me 27. So anytime you're directly correlating with light, you're going to see this number pop up quite often. But it's not the only number that pops up, because it turns out that there is another leg that is actually found in the Sator square, and that is going to be the 173555371 palindrome. And when you end up adding those numbers together, well, lo and behold, you end up with 37, not 27. Now, first, you might think that this might throw you off, but 37 and 27 are highly powerful numbers, and I am going to show you why. When we overlap the two, we end up with a sign that many people have seen that has been represented by hate, that has been represented by taking away people's choice, that has been represented by the war that we went through. But this symbol is far older than the swastika. It is far older than the swastika. In fact, it is in the Hopi, it is in the Malaya, it is in the Tibet, it is in China, it's been in Japan, it's been in Bali, it's Jewish, it's Greek, it's Jan, it's Aztec. The symbol that you are seeing right there is nothing to do with what we learned in school, and it has to do with the cosmos and following the Big Dipper. So as you can see right here, you have the spring, the summer, the winter, and the fall. And each one of these rotate in a counterclockwise or clockwise rotation that gives us different energy on Earth. Okay, so it is much older than what we have been told. And most importantly is that when you find things in this world that give you answers that directly correlate to the stars, you have to pay attention. Because for the first time ever, you move from concept to experience. You have something that people can see with their own eyes, that people can experience with their own senses. And so when you end up looking at this, what you see is you see the pattern of our winter, our fall, our spring, and our summer. And because of that, you can actually plant things and you can change things and you can know that that energy is going to shift before anyone else does. This is something that was absolutely used to keep more secret, so that there was not so much control. It was more about the fact that you didn't want to take away the option for other people to discover these amazing things. Okay. It wasn't until it got into certain hands that it became more about control, at least from our perspective. But the understanding of this is it goes much older and is found in all different cultures throughout history. Okay. So when we take those two numbers that we were talking about, 27, 37, we end up with 64. 64 is a very, very important number, especially if you are a chess player, because it is the amount of squares that are found on a chess board. It is also a 4x4 Rubik's Cube. So if you're, working on trying to understand how things move, how energy moves, being able to see through things, the Rubik's Cube is fantastic for that. Okay, so let's look into another part of this. So we know that if we take 37 plus 27, we end up with 64. But 1 divided by 37 reveals the missing link of the 64 cube, because 1 divided by 37 is 0.027027,027. But what is really fascinating about this is that even though 1 divided by 37 reveals the 27, it turns out that 1 divided by 27 reveals the 37. 1 divided by 27 is 0.037,037,037. Okay. And 37 divided by 27, and this is my favorite one, gives you 1.37. And there is some fantastic information about that number 137. All right. 37 divided by 27 reveals to you what is referred to as the fine structure constant. Okay, so in physics, the fine structure constant, also known as Sommerfeld's constant, commonly denoted by the alpha symbol, which is very important because the alpha symbol, or the number that represents alpha, is 137649. So the starting point of the alpha is 137. All right, and that's also the Greek letter alpha. Okay, it is a fundamental physical constant which quantifies the strength of an electromagnetic interaction between elementary charged particles. Okay, now that sounds very complex. I'm going to explain that here in a second, but let's keep going. I love the fact that Pauli joked and said, a famous physicist said, "When I die, the first question to the devil will be, what is the meaning of the fine structure constant?" And the reason for that is because it baffles every physicist. They put it on their wall. You've had physicists who have died in rooms according to 137. No one has been able to understand where this number comes from, but we do understand that it is prevalent in everything. If this number was shifted just slightly, such as a 137.5, which is also known as the golden angle, everything in the universe would look completely different. Okay. I love this one. This one's one of my favorites, by Richard Feynman, that says, "It has been a mystery ever since it was discovered more than 50 years ago. And all good theoretical physicists put this number up on their wall and worry about it. It is one of the greatest mysteries of physics. A magic number that comes to us with no understanding by man. You might say the hand of God wrote that number, and we don't know how he or she pushed their pencil." And what I love about this is that you're talking about a physicist, somebody who does not believe in God. Science and spirituality are very much separated 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And yet you have one of the most famous physicists, Richard Feynman, talking about God because of this number. All right. It is a bafflement number. All right. The universe is said to be 13.7 billion years old. Now, I love the fact that people will say, well, what about every year that goes by? Is it not growing? Yes, absolutely. But every year that goes by doesn't touch 13.7 billion years. Okay, so you would need 700 million years before you would even come close to changing that number. So it is safe to assume that when we came up with 13.7 billion, this was not arbitrary. It was to align with all the other things that you're seeing, such as the fine structure constant. Okay. If this number is the structure of the universe, a simple divider starts the journey of life. Okay, so that's the understanding that simply dividing the numbers will end up giving you the starting process of life. So if you take 64, divide that and split it up into the 37 and 27, you start the process of life. If you take the 1.37 and you end up with the 27 and the 37 that are dividing by each other, you end up with the start of life. But my favorite one, of course, is going to be aligned with a 9, because if you take 37 times 27, you end up with 999. It is found in everything. All right. So that's a little bit of information on the Sator Square. It's one of my favorite things to talk about in terms of aligning something from history directly to modern day, because the understanding and the knowledge that is found in this Sator Square is what actually propelled a lot of what we see in the world today. All right. Get your 9 vibes aligned.